I've been thinking about what you said last time.
Really? That's great to hear.
People often said she was lucky to have family around her. They said it kindly, with smiles, as if she could not hear the small pauses between their words. As if she did not notice the way conversations changed when she entered the room. She lived quietly in the same house she had lived in for years. The rooms were clean, familiar, and full of memories. She moved slowly, not because her mind was weak, but because she had learned that slowness made people careless. When you move slowly, others stop watching closely. At family gatherings, she usually sat near the window. From there, she could see faces clearly. She listened more than she spoke. She noticed who avoided her eyes and who spoke louder than necessary, as if volume could replace respect. At first, the comments were small. "She forgets things sometimes. It's normal at her age. Don't confuse her." They said these things gently, but gently did not mean kindly. One afternoon, during a casual visit, she walked into the room and felt it instantly. The conversation stopped too suddenly. Someone laughed, then cleared their throat. Another person reached for their phone, pretending to be busy. She smiled politely, the way she always did. "What were you talking about?" she asked. "Oh, nothing important," someone replied quickly. "Just boring stuff." Boring. That word stayed with her. She had lived long enough to know the difference between boring and hidden. Later that day, while tea was being poured and chairs scraped against the floor, she heard it. A laugh that was not meant for her ears. A sentence spoken too freely. "She's basically senile now," someone said. "She won't remember any of this." The word hit harder than any raised voice ever could. Senile. She did not react. She did not gasp or speak. She simply lowered herself into her chair and stirred her tea slowly. The spoon made a soft sound against the cup. No one noticed her hands were steady. Inside, something shifted. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. That night, when the house was quiet and the lights were low, she sat alone at the table. The same table where birthdays had been celebrated and hard conversations had been avoided. She placed her phone in front of her and looked at it for a long moment. She remembered details clearly. Dates. Words. Tones of voice. She remembered who said what, and who stayed silent. People thought memory faded all at once. They were wrong. Some memories sharpened with time. Earlier that day had not been the first moment. Just the clearest one. She realized something then. They were not just talking about her. They were talking around her. Making plans that did not include her voice. Decisions that assumed her absence, even while she was still very much present. She did not yet know what those plans were. But she knew enough to understand one thing. They believed she could not protect herself. She picked up her phone and opened a simple app. Nothing special. No tricks. Just a small red dot waiting patiently. Her finger hovered over the screen. She hesitated, not because she was unsure, but because she was disappointed. Family should not require proof. Trust should not need recording. But trust had already been broken. She pressed record. The phone lay quietly on the table as voices drifted in from the next room. Comfortable voices. Confident voices. Voices that believed they were safe. She listened. She did not interrupt. She did not confront. She let them speak. And as they spoke, she understood something that surprised even her. This was not about revenge. It was about dignity. About being seen. About refusing to disappear just because others found it convenient. When the recording ended, she turned off the phone and placed it face down. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark screen, calm, alert, very much aware. "They think I'm forgetting," she whispered to the empty room. She allowed herself a small, quiet smile. "I remember everything." After that night, nothing around her looked the same. The house was still quiet in the mornings. Sunlight still reached the same spots on the floor. Cups still sat where they always had. But her attention sharpened. She noticed pauses. She noticed glances. She noticed how often people spoke in half sentences when she was near. They assumed she forgot what was said yesterday. She did not. She began carrying her phone with her more often. Not openly. Not nervously. Just naturally, like anyone else would. Sometimes it rested in her pocket. Sometimes it lay face down on the table. Always close enough. They grew comfortable again. That was the dangerous part. One afternoon, she sat in the living room reading, or at least pretending to. The pages did not turn. Her eyes stayed on the same line. Voices drifted in from the hallway. Low voices. Careless voices. "She doesn't need to know all that," someone said. "Exactly," another replied. "Why confuse her?" Confuse her. She pressed her phone screen once. The small red dot appeared again. "She signs things without really reading now," a voice said softly, almost kindly. "It's easier that way." The words settled slowly, like dust. Another voice laughed. "She trusts us. Always has." The laughter was not cruel. That made it worse. She kept her breathing slow. Her hands rested gently on the book. No shaking. No sound. She had learned long ago that fear was loud. Control was quiet. As the voices continued, she realized something that hurt more than the insult itself. They were not afraid of being overheard. That meant they had done this before. That evening, during dinner, they spoke to her as usual. Asked if she was tired. Reminded her gently of things she already knew. Corrected her when she paused, even when she was right. She smiled. Thanked them. Played her part. Inside, she counted details. Who spoke first? Who stayed silent? Who avoided her eyes when certain topics came up? Later, when the house grew still again, she listened to the recording alone. She did not cry. She did not rush. She listened carefully, once, then again. The voices were clear. Too clear. She placed the phone down and stared at the ceiling. For a moment, she wondered if she was overreacting. If maybe this was just concern, poorly expressed. But then she remembered the laughter. The confidence. The way her presence had never slowed their words. Concern does not hide. Control does. Over the next few days, more moments followed. Always small. Always spoken as if she were not there. "This will be easier later. She won't question it. She's not really paying attention anymore." Each time, the red dot appeared. She did not rush to confront anyone. She did not warn them. She did not seek sympathy. She collected truth. At night, she sat alone and labeled each recording carefully. Date. Time. Nothing emotional. Just facts. She felt strangely calm while doing it. As if her mind had stepped into a role it had been preparing for quietly. She realized something important then. They thought age had taken her awareness. What it had really taken was her need to explain herself. One evening, someone asked her gently, "Do you remember what we talked about yesterday?" She looked up and smiled. "Of course," she said. They laughed softly, relieved. She laughed too, but for a different reason. Because she remembered far more than they imagined. And she was no longer listening just to protect herself. She was listening to understand how far this went. As she turned off the light that night, her phone rested beside her. Silent. Heavy with voices. "This isn't over," she thought quietly. Not yet. By now, recording had become part of her routine. Not out of fear. Not out of habit. But out of understanding. She no longer questioned whether she was imagining things. The recordings removed all doubt. Voices did not lie. Intentions revealed themselves when people believed no one was listening. She stopped feeling surprised. That was the hardest part. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Calm words. Soft laughter. Decisions made without her knowledge, always. For her own good. The phrase returned again and again, spoken like a shield. For her own good. She sat through meals where plans were discussed vaguely. Dates were mentioned without details. Papers were referred to but never shown. When she asked questions, answers came quickly, gently, and incomplete. "Don't worry about that. We'll handle it. You've done enough already." She nodded. She thanked them. Inside, she felt something tighten, not anger, but resolve. One afternoon, she noticed something different. A document lay on the table, face down. Not hidden. Just left there carelessly. She recognized the folder immediately. She had seen similar ones years ago, back when decisions required her signature. She did not touch it. Instead, she listened. "We should move forward soon," someone said. "Before things get complicated." Another voice replied. "It's better if she doesn't know too much. Less stress." Stress. That word followed Senile now, joining the list of reasons they used to silence her. The red dot glowed quietly in her pocket. Later that evening, she sat alone and listened to the new recording. Her hands remained steady, but her chest felt heavy. Not because she was scared, but because she finally understood the full picture. This was not confusion. This was planning. They believed they were protecting her. Or perhaps protecting themselves. Either way, they had decided her voice no longer mattered. She paused the recording and closed her eyes. She remembered younger years, when her opinions were asked for. When her decisions shaped rooms and lives. When people waited for her approval. That woman had not vanished. She had simply been underestimated. For the first time since this began, she allowed herself to feel the sadness fully. Not for what might be lost, but for what already had been, trust. She realized something important then. If she spoke too soon, they would deny everything. If she accused them without proof, she would become exactly what they already believed. So she waited. Over the following days, she noticed how relaxed they became. How jokes returned. How careless words slipped out faster. They believed the problem had already solved itself. "She doesn't even notice anymore," someone said one evening. She noticed. She noticed everything. That night, she organized the recordings carefully. Not emotionally. Logically. She listened again, not as a hurt family member, but as someone preparing to explain the truth to another person. She practiced telling the story in her mind, clearly, calmly, without accusation. Facts only. When she finished, she placed the phone down and sat back. The room felt different now. Not heavy, but settled. She was no longer gathering information. She had enough. As she prepared for bed, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her face looked older, yes, but her eyes were sharp. Focused. "They think time is on their side," she thought. It wasn't. Because she was done listening in silence. And soon, she would choose the right moment to speak. She did not confront anyone right away. That choice surprised even her. There were moments when the words sat heavy on her chest, ready to come out. Moments when a single sentence could have changed the tone of the room. But she had learned something important over the years. Truth, when rushed, can be dismissed. Truth, when timed well, cannot. Instead of speaking, she began preparing quietly. One morning, she dressed carefully and left the house alone. No announcements. No explanations. Just a simple, "I'll be back later." No one questioned it. They never did anymore. She walked into a small office where conversations were meant to stay private. The room was plain. Comfortable. Safe. She felt nervous for the first time in days, not because she doubted herself, but because she was about to be believed. She placed her phone on the table and explained slowly. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. Just facts. How things had changed. How people spoke when they thought she wasn't listening. How she began recording, not to accuse, but to protect herself. When she pressed play, the room filled with familiar voices. The person across from her listened without interruption. No raised eyebrows. No pity. Just attention. When the recording ended, there was a pause. "These are very clear," the person said calmly. That sentence brought unexpected relief. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Relief. She asked questions next. Simple ones. What was allowed? What was not? What she could do without causing harm to herself or others. She was careful. She did not want drama. She wanted control. She learned something important that day. She was not powerless. She left with guidance, not instructions. With clarity, not fear. The truth, it turned out, did not need shouting. It needed structure. Back at home, nothing seemed different. The same smiles. The same gentle tones. The same assumptions. They did not know she had stepped outside their version of her. They continued speaking freely. She doesn't need to be involved. She'll just get upset. She trusts us. Each sentence felt lighter now. Not because it hurt less, but because it no longer confused her. She had a direction. One evening, someone spoke too confidently. A comment about timing. About moving forward soon. About how. She won't notice. She noticed. She did not react. Instead, she marked the moment quietly. That night, she sat alone and thought about the word they used most often. Confused. She had never felt more clear. She understood now why people underestimated the quiet ones. Silence made others careless. Silence made them reveal themselves. And she had given them plenty of silence. As she prepared for bed, she placed her phone on the night table. Not as a weapon. Not as proof. As protection. Soon, she would speak. But not tonight. Tonight, she slept calmly, knowing something they did not. The truth was no longer just hers. And when it surfaced, it would do so without anger, only clarity. The meeting was called on an ordinary afternoon. Nothing about it felt urgent. No raised voices. No dramatic messages. Just a simple request for everyone to sit together for a moment. They agreed easily. Why wouldn't they? They had nothing to worry about. Or so they believed. She sat at the same table where she had listened in silence for weeks. The room was bright. Curtains open. No shadows to hide behind. She noticed how relaxed everyone seemed. Some leaned back in their chairs. One person checked their phone. They expected a short conversation. They expected her to forget her point halfway through. She folded her hands and looked around the table slowly. She did not rush. She did not interrupt anyone. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "I want to talk about something important," she said. A pause followed. Someone smiled gently. "Of course. Take your time." She nodded. "I've been told many times that I forget things," she continued. "That I get confused. That it's better if I don't worry about certain matters." No one disagreed. She reached for her phone and placed it on the table. That small movement changed the air in the room. "I want to play something," she said calmly. Someone laughed lightly. "Is this really necessary?" She did not answer. She pressed play. At first, the voices sounded normal. Familiar. Almost harmless. A few people smiled, relaxed. Then the words became clear. "She won't remember. It's easier if she doesn't know. She trusts us." The smiles faded. No one spoke. The recording continued, one conversation flowing into another. Each voice louder than intended. Each sentence clearer than expected. She watched their faces, not with anger, but with curiosity. Some stared at the table. Some shook their heads slightly, as if denial could erase sound. When the recording stopped, the room felt heavy. She did not raise her voice. "I didn't record these to hurt anyone," she said quietly. "I recorded them because I needed to understand what was happening around me." Someone tried to speak, then stopped. "I am not confused," she continued. "I am careful. And I am still capable of making my own decisions." A long silence followed. Finally, someone said, "We were just trying to help." She nodded. Help doesn't happen without honesty. There was no argument. No shouting. No dramatic exits. Just the slow realization that they had been heard when they believed they were safe. She gathered her phone and stood. I don't want apologies, she said. I want respect. No one stopped her. As she left the room, she felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth was no longer hidden. Behind her, the room stayed silent. The days after the meeting felt different. Not louder. Not dramatic. Quieter. People spoke more carefully now. Not softly in a pretending way, but thoughtfully. The kind of careful that comes when someone realizes they were wrong, not just caught. She noticed the change immediately. Questions were asked instead of decisions being made for her. Papers were placed in front of her, not signed behind her back. Conversations waited until she was present. No one used the word confused anymore. Some relationships felt distant. Trust, once cracked, does not return overnight. She accepted that without bitterness. Respect, she knew, was more important than closeness built on false kindness. One afternoon, someone said gently, "We didn't think you were paying attention." She looked up calmly. "I was," she replied. "I just didn't feel the need to argue." That sentence stayed in the room long after it was spoken. She began reclaiming small pieces of her life. Making her own appointments. Reviewing documents at her own pace. Saying no when something did not feel right. No explanations. No apologies. Just clarity. At night, she deleted most of the recordings. Not because they were useless, but because they had served their purpose. She kept one, not to hold against anyone, but to remind herself of something important. Age had changed her body. It had not changed her mind. She realized how easily society confuses silence with weakness, and age with absence. How quickly people decide someone else's voice no longer matters. She had nearly believed it herself. But pressing that record button had not been about exposing others. It had been about reminding herself who she was. One evening, she sat by the window, watching the light fade from the sky. The house felt peaceful again, not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was hidden. They thought I was forgetting, she thought quietly. She smiled. I was remembering. And for the first time in a long while, she felt fully seen.